Chapter 25, Support Programs and Groups. Alice asked the Cheshire Cat, who was sitting in a tree, "What road do I take?" The cat asked, "Where do you want to go?" "I don't know," Alice answered. "Then," said the cat, "it really doesn't matter, does it?" Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Definition of a support program. Non-professional members providing various types of help regarding a common, burdensome characteristic. Members with common issues share their perspectives and coping strategies in an attempt to assist other members progress, and by sharing and disclosing, they experience cathartic and therapeutic results themselves. A support group can be formal and revolve around a central philosophy or strategy, or informal with no predetermined philosophy or strategy. By interacting with other individuals burdened by the same characteristic, you can learn and gain perspectives that would be inaccessible to you on your own. A support group is often led by a veteran member of similar issues who is well trained in the philosophy, formal goals, and strategies of the organization, if it exists. Some support groups are led or facilitated by professionals, but the professional is not the central role of the group. He or she manages and focuses the group while the group is in charge of itself, taking on a life of its own. There are thousands of support groups available, usually at least a few or more per city or community. The positive features of support groups are availability, affordability, perspective from other like-minded and afflicted people, and the leadership of an experienced, maybe even trained or professional group leader. Support groups can provide focus, commitment, and guidance in a non-judgmental atmosphere. The biggest risk is that any member of the group, even several, could be toxic, unstable, or disturbed, to say the least. Some could be emotionally impaired, intellectually or maturely, and could undermine the process and objective of recovery. And some could even be willing to provide drugs or drug connections. Meetings are a great place to score dope. Support groups should not be a singular treatment method. Support groups should only be attended in concurrence with other strategies. It is unlikely that a group, its members, or any specific members has the right answers just for you. A person new in recovery is very vulnerable to counterproductive, possibly even harmful perspectives and advice, and cannot scrutinize properly until too late. Drugs impair thinking and reasoning, and therefore the addict is not exercising the best clarity yet. Lack of clarity and desperation for improvement makes him or her very vulnerable and gullible. The 12 steps. The most common support program is the 12 steps, also known as AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or any specific derivative. The 12-step program is typically not referred to and even avoids the label of being a support group, but there it is. Reread the above support group definition. There are now 12-step groups for nearly everyone. AA for alcoholics, NA for narcotics, an SA for sex, an SA for shoplifting. There's a GA for gamblers, CMA for crystal meth, no, not country music awards, and on and on. The philosophy is the same for each group regardless of the DOC, but each specific meeting is populated by those who relate to the specific DOC. Some people like to mix it up, and occasionally a drug addict might attend Alcoholics Anonymous, and an alcoholic may attend a Cocaine Anonymous group, simply because he or she resonates with the group of that specific DOC mentality. Let's review the pros and cons of 12 steps. The cons. 1. It's a support group, not treatment. 2. It has some very bad people, a lot of novices and people uncommitted to recovery. 3. They have sponsors. 4. It is often cultish. 5. It has little objectivity. 6. It doesn't adapt itself well to individuals. 7. The 12 steps can seem antiquated. 8. Not relatable. The pros. It's free. 2. It's a great solid philosophy. 3. Accessibility. It's international, and there's almost always a meeting happening nearby. 4. It has some very good people and many recovery veterans. 5. They have sponsors. 6. It's adaptable to almost everyone if they really choose to apply it and can learn it properly. As mentioned in my earlier disclaimers, 12-steppers might want to skip this section because I'm going to get a little rough on the 12 steps. I'll start with the cons so we can conclude with the pros, so you can see I'm not a total naysayer about it. The cons. We have a list of 8 cons to review. These cons do not negate the benefits the 12 steps can offer so long as they are compensated for or conscious of. By being aware of them, they can be avoided, minimized, or even neutralized while still attending meetings. Number 1, it is not treatment. It is very limited in the initial stages of absence, as a support group is inadequate to deal with this very turbulent and intense early stages of recovery unless combined with other methods. While the 12-step program is designed to be a support group, members often overstep their boundaries and propagate it as a treatment program. Yes, it's true that 12-step philosophy, when adhered to properly, is profound and in essence contains all one needs to realize recovery fully. However, the meetings you attend are there to provide support in the sense that you can identify with others, learn from their experiences, and speak out to others to gain insight about your own experience, not receive treatment. The 12 Steps is a support group program that adheres to a specific philosophy and set of strategies of establishing and sustaining sobriety. 3 critical components are often overstepped by the members, not the program. Anonymity. Members often disclose their affiliation with the group to non-members, like neighbors. You may run into members at public places, like the grocery store or school or coffee shop, and if they acknowledge you, it is likely to be disclosed you're a 12-step member. It is challenging to maintain anonymity and privacy of such a sensitive issue in your own community when several members of the same community may be members at your local meetings. Word gets out. Non-judgment. Members are lay people who are not trained in discretion or communication skills. Every human being has personal values, beliefs, and opinions, and untrained people can inadvertently offend others by sharing theirs, assuming others feel the same way. Number 4, supportive. Support is the provision of an encouragement and sympathy. Members often go beyond the role of being supportive to advising or counseling others, regardless of their lack of training or experience. Often the advice or counsel may be counterproductive or even harmful. Number 5, it has some very bad people. A lot of novices and uncommitted people are in recovery. Some of the members, not the philosophy, may be dysfunctional and struggling and in no position or in touch to advise or counsel others, yet they often do. Some members may have serious disorder issues such as bipolarity, depression, manic, oppositional, or others, disqualifying them to provide formal support. Many members are simply not committed to the recovery goal and can undermine the program simply by their presence in the group and even more by direct interaction or involvement. Some members may have highly questionable morals or ethics and could even be involved with criminal behaviors. Some members may deal with drugs, still do drugs, encourage it, or even provide drugs. The pressure to live the 12 steps and attend meetings is often counterproductive and eventually turns people off of the philosophy and the program instead of on. Number 6, uncommitted members. Somehow the 12 steps has become the default program of the court system. AA has not been evaluated by court professionals or a selected panel or scrutinized by professional experts to arrive at this decision. It was slowly adopted and accepted, merely a cultural thing and not a scientific one. In 2007, it was deemed unconstitutional to demand attendance at 12-step meetings as a parole or court condition, yet it still continues today. I've treated many clients who were commanded by the court to show proof of attending a 12-step program. As a state registered and certified addiction counselor, a formal letter from me that confirms their involvement with my program was more than compliant. Since many people are attending just to get their court card signed, this creates high numbers of attendees not committed to their recovery. There are meetings where this option is not allowed called closed meetings. Number 7, they have sponsors. It should be pointed out that a sponsor is not a formal part of the AA philosophy, and nowhere in the original literature is it even mentioned by the founders. Sponsors can be a good thing, but they can be negative too. The current criteria to become a sponsor is 6 months of sobriety. You are learning here that at 6 months, you don't have sobriety. You're in early recovery. To be sure, 6 months is a huge accomplishment, but it is in no way enough time to be in the very delicate and important position of mentoring someone else's fragile recovery. A mistake in this process could wind up with someone dead. This is not a responsibility to be taken lightly. Sponsors can be dysfunctional, struggling with their own recoveries, inexperienced, needy, who knows? Novices are in weakened and vulnerable states where their reason and judgments are impaired. They are not yet capable of selecting a healthy mentor. In the pro section coming up, we will go over some suggested criteria for selecting a sponsor and being one. Number 8, it is often cultish. Pressure to comply and attend meetings comes in the form of inferences that if you don't completely comply and adhere to the 12-step program, you will inevitably relapse and fail. It is inferred that you must be either dumb, dysfunctional, or not seriously committed if you don't attend religiously. When criticized for this, members often state that the person who is complaining is in denial and not well enough to determine this pressure accurately. This can cause self-doubt and confusion to the new member, as the existing members are not taking accountability for the defects within themselves or within the group. I once asked another counselor, an AA veteran, if she thought people could get sober without going to meetings. She said no. I said, then how do you explain me? 12-steppers can sometimes feel like they have the only answer. Outwardly, many of them members will profess that whatever works is a cornerstone of the philosophy, but they demonstrate a very hypocritical view of that. There's a lot of inappropriate pressure to conform, even insisting that 30 meetings in 30 days or even 90 meetings in 90 days is the best or only solution, stating and scaring others into believing that if they don't work fervently on their steps and attend meetings, they will surely relapse and lose everything. That might be true for some, but not for all. Personally, if you made me go to that many meetings in that many days, I would certainly have returned to drugs. That level of intense attendance is over-identification with my addict self, something that I, at times, needed a break from. Going to a movie can sometimes be just as good as going to a meeting. Hanging out with your nephew or little sister at the zoo can be just as healing and therapeutic as listening to a speaker at a speaker meeting. The meetings can become their own bubble microcosm, a culture existing within its own culture, just like drugs and addiction, losing sight and touch with the real rest of the outside world. There is often a feeling of either being a member of the 12-step culture or not being a member, and if not, then your sobriety is in serious jeopardy because of that. 12-steppers refer to the original book by the founders as the Big Book. That pretty much validates my point that this original book of the Alcoholics Anonymous philosophy is referred to by a name that is synonymously used with the Bible. AA members are regularly confronted with this cult-like allegation and objectively deny it, claiming it's unfounded, yet the sheer number of people who have this impression is revealing in itself. The higher power concept within the 12 steps is often lost on those who struggle with spirituality or are atheists. As with most concepts, the way to cultivate understanding is through a slow, sequential exploratory process. First graders do not begin with algebra. Taking a faithless person straight to a faith mentality is inappropriate. They first must be taught about life itself, the human condition, and maybe even some philosophy before they can even begin to grasp the very advanced concepts of spirituality. This is true with all the steps. There is a rather take it or leave it, all or nothing attitude in 12-step groups. Number 9, it has very little objectivity. People, as a rule, are not prone to objectivity, especially if they are not trained to be objective. Therefore, it is nearly impossible to get objective advice or support from members. The importance of objectivity from a mentoring perspective is critical. While people in meetings mean well, they simply lack the training and experience that a professional should have. Members are not officially trained or experienced with anything more than their personal life and experiences. This can work out really well or really badly. This depends on the person and his or her life experiences. In my opinion, no human being is totally objective, me included. That is, not influenced by his or her personal perspectives. The program promotes and supports objectivity, but it simply doesn't have it and can't. Objectivity is merely not a feasible feature of a somewhat random group of people who are currently suffering from dysfunction and varied defects like addiction. Their lives are in turmoil to some degree or other, so clarity and objectivity is not accessible. Number 10, it doesn't adapt itself well. It does not adapt well to the uniqueness of individuals, and it cannot properly learn to do so. The 12 steps are a formula, but unlike baking a cake, the formula, i.e. the steps, is intangible and can be rather abstract, especially for someone new to recovery. Sobriety is not really a one-size-fits-all process, and the 12-step program has a set formula that says to its members, adapt to me since I cannot adapt to you. While it is a living, evolving philosophical experience, it is rather set in its ways, and every event, and even the steps themselves, can be widely interpreted, causing confusion. People need something customized rather than a set formula that can't recognize them as individuals or change or reformulate as an individual and his or her circumstances change. The varying interpretations of the steps and their meanings can cause much confusion at a time when clarity of thinking, commitment, and structure is nearly vital. Number 11, the 12 steps can seem antiquated. To a 19-year-old struggling with heroin, the 12 steps seems archaic. It is too old school and has hardly changed in almost 100 years, even though our understanding of addiction has broadened dramatically. For many people, it simply isn't fresh enough to remain relevant to them. Maybe it could reinvent itself, but that might be counterproductive. Nearly everyone knows what to expect when going to a meeting, so it lacks intensity and dynamism, something addicts crave with abundance. They often feel bored and often even feel depressed when they leave meetings, as they hear how, even after years of trying, people are still struggling and often not making it. I am not suggesting the program actually is antiquated. I'm saying it is often perceived that way. Number 12, not relatable. For many people, the 12 steps are not cerebral enough. Well-read and studious types are more left-brained, analytical, and consistently feel understimulated, mentally restless. An addict who is understimulated and restless, well, you do the math and it doesn't end well. Because it's free, it often attracts a lot of underprivileged people, causing career and family types to feel too far out of their comfort zones. I encourage them to see past it and see it as an even greater opportunity to learn their humility and connect with society and humanity in ways they wouldn't normally. However, especially in the beginning, people often need something and people they can relate to. I personally do not agree with this criticism of meetings being populated by the dregs of society and encourage people to seek out other meetings and adapt to the ones accessible to them. However, it remains a common deterrent to many. While many meeting groups are indeed rather underprivileged and uneducated, there are many meetings that have a blend of every part of society and many that are privileged and educated. Overall, I highly recommend 12-step meetings and their support and encourage learning and applying the philosophy, but more as an enhancement to treatment, not as a replacement for it. The clients I have who thrive the best see me privately and also go to some form of support group. They participate in recovery-oriented programs and events 2 to 3 times per week in the beginning, 1 to 2 per week later on, and less as time goes on. All right, the pros, yay. Number 1, it's free. What else is there to say? You get quite a lot for next to nothing. There is no financial requirement, and for many people, that makes it, if not the best option, the only option. Hats off to them for keeping it alive for free for almost 100 years. Number 2, it's a great, solid philosophy. The bottom line is that when you fully understand the philosophy and apply it with true dedication and commitment to your life, it is sufficient to bring you from absence to recovery to sobriety. I attended many meetings in my early days and formed many of the negative opinions previously listed in those days. However, after about 5 years of being clean and sober and working hard at improving my life and myself, I reviewed the 12 steps and realized that as I had worked hard individually at recovery and self-improvement, I coincidentally did all the steps along the way. You could say that if you work the steps, you will gain sobriety, or you could say if you gain sobriety, you'll work your steps. The fault lies not in the philosophy, but in how it's learned or taught. For example, when clients ask me to work their steps with them, the first assignment I have for them is to write down the first 6 steps and then define them in their own words in a sentence or 2. In the next session, we discuss those meanings and definitions, and then they define the last 6 steps. Those defined steps are then put away while we work on performing only the first couple of steps. In a few weeks, I ask them to repeat the defining exercise again, and we compare the original definitions with the newer ones. They are surprisingly different. Clients cannot specifically remember what they wrote the first time and write the new definitions with their newest perceptions and attitudes. We see a deeper understanding taking place. It's only when they have a very full and deep understanding of a step that I encourage actually working on it. Sobriety cannot be rushed. Steps should be carefully considered and understood before working on or with them. When taken slowly and with careful contemplation and a sober or serious attitude, the philosophy definitely works. Number 3, there's always a meeting going on somewhere. AA, NA, SA, CMA, it makes no difference. There's always a meeting happening somewhere. Midnight in the city or desert, early in the morning or afternoon in Europe, Africa, or Egypt. At almost all hours and in almost every developed nation and country, AA is there. They've been around for close to 100 years, so they don't seem to be going away anytime soon. While I didn't always get something out of going to meetings, but often I did, if nothing else, it gave me a safe haven and a good way to occupy my time on a Saturday or Tuesday night. Better to be immersed in a recovery room atmosphere than to sit at home dwelling on my impulses and agony. Number 4, it has some very good people and veterans in recovery. Some of the most seasoned recovery veterans are involved in 12 steps. You can meet a lot of good people there. It's a good mixed bag of folks, and I recommend mixing it up by attending a variety of meetings to benefit from this variety. When you stick to your peer group, you miss out on the diversity of recovery and the beneficial understanding that this disorder affects all different people from all walks of life. Go downtown, uptown, suburbia, in the sticks, whatever. Learn from as many as you can. The main point of going to support groups is to be challenged and exposed to varying ideas and personalities. This means learning how to cope with the diversity of people who are different than you. A support group is meant to be a cultural microcosm, so don't limit yourself and don't quit when it gets awkward or downright uncomfortable. Consider trying a meeting a few times before deciding a specific meeting isn't right for you. Number 5, responsibilities. Feel free to donate money or time to the group. You can run for an office position to assist in organizing or facilitating meetings. Every meeting group requires administration, coffee, snacks, no donuts, a house, a donated office, a church, paperwork, and other duties need to be performed by volunteers within the group or for the meetings to exist and continue. Volunteering for any of these roles is not only a charitable act, but enhances sobriety commitment. But also it is a productive way to use time and distract you from the urge to use and compulsion. It is counterintuitive in the sense that we often feel more responsibilities can add stress and put us at risk. But when we have roles to fill and responsibilities to a greater cause, most people instinctively rise to this occasion. I'm terrible at staying sober for myself, but for God, my son, my girlfriend, and my clients who look up to me, much easier. Number 6, they have sponsors. Sponsors are individuals who help a less experienced addict in his or her attempts to contemplate the 12 steps and commit properly to the program. They become a personal mentor to the 12-step process. Sponsors are individuals who are well versed in the 12-step philosophy and committed to give back to the program out of gratitude and duty for their sober living. They can be wise, supportive, accessible, caring, and provide personal encouragement, strength, and support when you need it the most. They may be veterans in recovery and in 12-step culture. They know what works and what doesn't. Ideally, a sponsor can be a personal mentor or guide, and if someone is to participate in the 12 steps, it is often successful merely because of the sponsor's involvement. The 12th step is to help and assist others in their recoveries. This can be a very good thing, not only for the sponsoree, but for the sponsor. Taking responsibility for someone else solidifies our recovery and deepens our commitment, as we now feel we need to live up to the ideal of sobriety. It's an extra amount of healthy pressure and incentive that can be very helpful for both. Sponsors who are qualified can be instrumental to the newcomer who is struggling to find meaning at the meetings and in his or her own life. Sponsors can lend a personal amount of support which the group can't. Sponsors can help you define the recovery and also mentor you through the very difficult and stormy seas of recovery. We already went over the cons of sponsors, so I won't be redundant, but carefully consider those cons when considering getting a sponsor. The criteria for a person to qualify as a sponsor: 10 years sober, 5 minimum. There are lots of 12-step veterans out there. Why should you settle for someone who isn't one? Your sponsor should have been through everything you're going through at least 4 or 5 times. At 10 years clean, he or she has probably worked the steps multiple times and learned more every time. The only time you should settle for less is if there's something else extraordinary about the sponsor and he or she meets all the other requirements listed. A mature age. It's tempting to get someone near your age range, thinking you'll have more in common and he or she will understand you better. Wrong. Someone slightly or quite a bit older is better for the same reason as him or her having lots of clean time is: more experience. Been where you are and beyond. Sorry folks, but anyone under 35 is typically still changing at too rapid of a rate to be stable enough to really mentor someone. There are of course exceptions to this rule, but rarely. Real maturity, i.e. knowing yourself, doesn't get real until around 35. Same sex, a must. You cannot risk any type of sexual complication, and if you keep to this rule, it will prevent it 100%. If homosexual, it is better to get a sponsor who is straight, or if the sponsor is also gay, they should be of the opposite sex. Also, someone who can relate to your relationship struggles can be helpful, and while many relationship issues are not gender or role specific, many are. Established in life. Established in life is a broad statement, but this means the sponsor is stable. He or she works regularly, functions in society on conventional levels, and has steady relationships. If married, the marriage is healthy. If in contact with family, he or she maintains good relations. If social, his or her friendships are functional, not codependent. This disqualifies a lot of people. Better to have no mentor than a bad one. Honest, respectful, humble. Honesty is essential, and it must be 100% across the board. No exceptions here. A sponsor should treat you with respect and compassion, and you should feel respect toward him or her as well. Humble is a rare quality in today's society, but you must get someone who has as much humility as you can find. The sponsor should not think he or she is better than others, not be racist or biased or condescending to others, and should be willing and able to see and work on his or her own faults. First, if your sponsor points out something you're doing wrong, he or she should be able to back it up with how they learned that. Has what you want. What do you want? Family, money, respect, spirituality? The person you select to mentor you should have, or at least be intently working toward, the same ideals and achievements you yourself respect and hope to attain. Not an identical career or other specific situation, but generally, ideally and philosophically similar goals. And the sponsor should be slightly or significantly ahead of you on these goals. For example, a client was neglecting the legal work required to complete his divorce and child custody issues. When I confronted him and firmly told him he needed to pay attention to them, he stated his sponsor had told him to complete his steps first, and only after he completed his steps should he attend to his son's legal needs. Is your sponsor a parent? I asked. No, he answered. Fire him. Having a single, never been married, childless sponsor is like having a non-addict sponsor you. If you don't have kids, you know nothing about being a parent and are totally unfit to advise on parental issues. If you doubt that, ask any parent, and I promise you, he or she will agree. One of the most essential components to your recovery is to take care of your responsibilities and prioritize them properly. Taking care of your child, in this case preserving your rights to them in a divorce, is critical and needs immediate attention. The difference in mentality and priorities in this case was too large to overlook. I asked him, could you truly express and articulate the parenting experience to someone who was not one? No, he answered. My client moved on to a sponsor who had children and still has a challenging, insightful relationship with him. There is no greater step than being accountable and dependable and fulfilling the responsibilities we have to those we love, those who love us, and those who are sincerely dependent upon us. You only sort of like them. Your sponsor is not your best friend. For sure, spending time with him or her shouldn't be uncomfortable or unpleasant, but it shouldn't be merely a happy, funny, good time either. A mentor's role in your life is to mentor. This means that a personal relationship should be minimal. Otherwise, subjective feelings get in the way. If you're too good of friends, you might subconsciously create an expectation of your sponsor taking it easy on you when they should be firm, and vice versa. You may take it easy on them and try not to burden them when you're in need. Too much of a personal element in the relationship will compromise objectivity. A sponsor should have his or her own life and not be dependent upon the sponsoree to entertain him or her. And the sponsoree should respect boundaries in the relationship. Above all, a sponsor should assist in recovery issues only. If the sponsor is not a trained and experienced counselor or therapist, his or her advice and guidance should be limited to the 12 steps. This is tricky because, as I have found in my career as a counselor, pretty much everything in life is contingent on recovery for an addict. Every element of an addict's life is relatable to and from the addiction. Still, a sponsor should not be so egocentric as to think he or she is qualified to advise and guide on all life issues. Sometimes the sponsor should say, I don't know how you should handle that. Maybe you should speak to a professional. Leaders or mentors have to be confident enough to admit when they are out of their depth or beyond their experience or element. Says, I don't know. One of the quickest clues to whether someone is right to sponsor you is if he or she is hesitant to say yes to the role. If you ask someone to sponsor you, the answer should be, I don't know. Let's hang out and go to some meetings and see if it's a good fit for both of us. Anyone who jumps at the chance, especially without knowing you and having some exposure to you, is too eager and probably lacks the maturity to put your recovery needs first. It seems virtuous to want to help and say yes without consideration, yet this shows immaturity and disproportionate confidence. It may be all right in life to go on a blind date, but we wouldn't marry the person we don't even know. in a marginal way. A sponsor-sponsoree relationship is like a marriage. There you have it, the rundown on the 12 steps. It's rough at times, but I think you can see that there are many good things to it as well. As I mentioned earlier, the best approach is a multidimensional one. Combine one-on-one counseling with support group meetings and your introverted solo work, and you'll get the best of all worlds and have access to a strong support network that will almost always be accessible to you in a time of need. If your counselor doesn't answer the phone, a support group member will, and vice versa. If no one answers, you've been training on your own too. The 12 steps are adaptable to almost everyone if they really choose to apply it and can learn it properly. If you take your time and put forth a sincere, open-minded effort, the 12-step process is powerful. It's not for white people only, or black people only, or poor, or middle class. The 12 steps can fit anyone who truly takes the time to work the philosophy with care and respect. There are very few other support groups out there. They may be hard to find, but if there's anything in your area, you'll be able to find them with the internet. Also, talk to others, even at 12-step meetings, and you might hear about an alternative program. Remember all the pros and cons of the 12-step program and apply, where applicable, the same criteria to other support groups. When a group is led by professionals, sit in on 3 or 4 meetings before you commit to joining or not. Don't run away if it isn't always uplifting and positive. It should be challenging and reflect life and society, which is not always uplifting or positive. The purpose of groups is to interact with others during the recovery process. Sometimes that means coping and feeling attacked or awkward, and sometimes it means feeling praised and supported. These can be opportunities for anger and pride, or humility and appreciation, depending on how you process them. I lived in Los Angeles, and as I did a search online for alternative support groups, I came up with nearly nothing. A major metropolis of millions of residents and only 2 or 3 alternative support groups to the 12 steps. There are always a few private professionals who are facilitating groups, but there are few, if any, recovery groups that even try to compete for attention with 12 steps. This is not because the 12 steps squashes competition so much, as it is because the 12 steps has become the default recovery organization, and therefore it is nearly impossible to maintain a recovery group with little to no attendance for very long. I began a support group in my own community and am fairly well known. The attendance was spotty, 7 people some weeks, 2 on others, and occasionally none. It got to the point where I was just not willing to sacrifice the time to commit, arrange, set up, and show up to a meeting when on some occasions I was simply alone and returning home. So I abandoned it, turning my focus entirely to private sessions, workshop events, and classes rather than routine meetings. Another group in my community does well and is going strong after many years with many participants. I do not refer my clients there, as I am concerned about their exposure to regular temptations, but there must be other groups in this big city that are good. One man I worked with went to a support group in Hollywood. We both felt that it was very productive for him. He had heard about it through the grapevine. Support group leaders. A group leader should be peripheral, not absent. The leader should allow the group to run itself completely, but not so absent that there is no structure or guidance. Lay people leaders often lose sight of their objectives and can easily get sidetracked into frivolous conversations and unrelated topics. The leader should be centered, present, and involved, but not so engaged that the group doesn't have a life of its own. A group leader, even a professional one, needs to maintain a healthy, respectful, learning atmosphere. He or she must enforce boundaries and create topics and areas of exploration and discussion, and try to create balance and diplomacy so everyone is benefiting. Beyond that, the leader should sit back and observe, allowing this social microcosm to function on its own and only intervene if it gets off track. Running a group can be very challenging and takes a great deal of patience and the ability to suppress the impulse to correct every wrong. The leader should provide structure and continuity to the group, preventing anarchy, but the details and the grit should be in the personalities of the group itself.